If you can dream it, we can help you create it. Welcome to the You Create podcast, the show that teaches you how to take the power and flexibility of a Stepcraft 3D CNC system and turn your ideas into reality. So let your ideas flow, because we want to know, what will you create?
Welcome to episode 3 of the You Create podcast. My name is Eric, and I want to welcome you back here this week. Thank you very much for joining me again. Last 2 weeks, we had kind of some elementary episodes. We talked about what is CNC and, a lot of the basic terminology and parts of the machine and things of that nature. And I think that's necessary because every day there's new people getting involved in this hobby / technology, and I think it's important to give everybody a nice outline and overview of what these things are. This week I'm going to do something a little different. I want to talk about a project and just some ideas, how to turn some ideas into a real thing. Now, this past weekend in New England, there's a big fair that goes on for 17 days every September. It's called the Big E. And during the 17 days, there's over 1.5 million people that go through here, and it's kind of considered like a world's fair. It's big. They have a lot of everything from amusement rides to there's a building called a Better Living Building, which is booths from different businesses trying to sell things, and you see some of the as seen on TV stuff. You see everything from companies selling beds to the latest ShamWow, and they have a lot of animals and things like that. And it was a really, really good time. I love going there. I don't usually go every year because it's kind of the same thing over and over. But this year I went with a little bit different mindset. Given my involvement with Stepcraft and having been doing a lot of different projects, I went kind of on a mission, a 2-part mission. We're considering actually attending this fair next year and having a booth there, which after actually walking around for a whole day and talking to some other vendors, I'm really excited to be considering to do that. I think it'd be great exposure for our product line. But the other reason I went was just to get some ideas, just to see what people are doing, what different crafts that people are making and selling, and what types of things that people come up with for ideas. Now, one thing that caught my eye, there was 2 or 3 booths. I think they were getting them all from the same manufacturer. When I first saw it, I thought that they were handmade by one particular company, but then as I walked around, I saw several booths throughout the entire fair that were selling the same kind of signs, and it just led me to believe that they're probably just buying them from some distributor somewhere and reselling them. But basically what they were they're a bunch of different sayings like love you more, or family is the best, things like that. And they were all cut out. I don't know whether they were done on a mill or on a laser. But I'm guessing these were a mill based on the finish that they had. And they were all connected. So all the letters from each of the sayings were designed in such a way that they were overlapping the next letter, so that when you looked at it and you created a toolpath, you had one continuous outline. So all the letters kind of joined together to make one sign. And they were silhouetted. So they weren't very thick. They were maybe 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch thick, depending on the size of the sign. And they were all spray painted black. So every one of them was black. And some of them had a stand that was basically a piece of pine, maybe 1 foot long, with a channel milled into it so that the sign would stand on vertical. So it'd be freestanding. And others were designed to be hung on a wall. They ranged in size anywhere from, I want to say 8 by 12. I saw some that were, close to 2 feet wide by however high proportionally, depending on the letters and the phrases. I'll put some pictures in the show notes of what they had at the fair. Now, this kind of intrigued me because the more I looked at it, I said, wow, these are actually really nice. And we had just bought a house and we're still decorating it. And I was trying to get some ideas for things that I'd want to have, in my home, and family and things like that are very important to me. So I always look for different signs or plaques or things that have to do with family and that sort of thing. So I was looking at the pricing on these, and there was one that I saw that was a phrase that I always tell my daughter and my son. It just says, "Love you more." And I said, wow, that's awesome. And I looked at the price, and it was, I think it was $23.50 for this little piece of thin plywood that was spray painted black. It wasn't like hand painted with, any decorations or anything. It was just a plain black silhouette. So I was going to get it. And then I started thinking about it. I said, this actually is something I could easily make in Illustrator or any drawing program for that matter, and mill out on my Stepcraft machine. So I left the fair kind of motivated with doing this project when I got back. And that night I got home and I opened up Illustrator and I was playing with some different letters and fonts, trying to see how I can get them so that they're merged together so the letters are touching, so that I would have one continuous toolpath and not a bunch of letters just falling apart separately that I would have to assemble somehow. And I figured something out on Illustrator. I figured out how to do it. And by the time this podcast goes live, I'm also going to have a link to a screencast that I'm doing that will show how I did that, how I made these signs from the basic drawing in Illustrator through using Cut 2D to set the toolpath, all the way to how I finished it by milling it on the Stepcraft 420. So I'm going to put the link for that. I already have a link set up for the Love You More sign that I did when we milled it out. I didn't do a screencast to show how I did it, but I did do a video that showed it being milled. And the finished product was amazing. It was just like what I saw at the fair. But what was interesting was that I figured it out for a 4x8 sheet of this plywood, because it's a birch plywood. So it was about $24 at Home Depot. And then what I did was I calculated out how much the 8x16 piece would have cost out of that sheet. And it worked out to about 86 cents or so worth of material. And in 10 minutes worth of milling time, I had this Love You More sign that I saw at the fair cut out on my machine. And I already had a can of black spray paint, but even if you had to go buy it, you're talking maybe $4 or $5 at Home Depot, and think of how many signs you can spray. This isn't very big. So I gave it a couple quick coats of black, and now it's hanging in my living room, and I love it. It looks nice. And so this is a really good example of something that you can do with a CNC mill. The possibilities are endless. And if you really look around, it's funny. You know how this saying goes that if you don't notice cars on the road until you buy one. And then it seems like every other car that's on the road is that exact car that you just bought. Well, this is the same thing. When you have access to a CNC, you start to look at things differently. You'll walk to a craft show or a fair, or you'll walk through Michael's Crafts or Joann Fabric or a big store like that, and you'll go down the aisle and you'll see things that are for sale, and you'll look at the price and you'll say, geez, I can make that in 5 minutes at home. And I love that about having the ability to have access to my own CNC to be able to do that stuff. Another example is I went to Michael's Crafts one day. It was with my daughter, and we were walking up and down the aisles, and I'm always getting ideas. And there was one aisle that had wooden letters, and that's all they were. They were about 3-4 inches tall. They were just individual cut letters out of pine, nothing fancy. And I looked at the price because her name is Abigail, and she's like, Daddy, we should get these and put my name, and we'll put it on my wall in my room. Well, they were selling them for like $3.50 a letter. And again, they weren't very fancy. It wasn't hardwood. It was just pine. It was no big deal. And so to do her name, I would have spent close to $15 in letters, and they were unfinished, so I'd still have to paint them somehow. And I told her, I said, no, we can do this at home. So I kind of made it a project for her and I, where we sat down on the computer and we drew the letters to the size and the font that she liked. And I was able to take the letters and we did it in Illustrator, and I moved it over to Cut 2D, created a toolpath, loaded a piece of clear 3/4 inch pine into my Stepcraft 840 actually. And we were able to cut out the letters for her room. And presently she's actually painting them. So when that project's done, I will post pictures of that. I think that they came out great. They required just a little bit of hand sanding after we were done. And she's going to town on customizing them the way she wants. So I figure my total expense in pine was maybe $2.75 to give her the letters. That would have cost me over $15. So, these are the types of things that you can look at now when you have a CNC and you have access to it. It could be something as simple as a coat rack. It could be maybe a wall sign outside your office door that says your name. You buy a piece of engraving material, use an engraving bit, and instead of sending out to Things Remembered or a store like that to have a custom name plaque made, you can make your own. We were engraving dog tags the other day, which came out awesome. They looked exactly like a standard issue dog tag, and it took a little while to figure out what font works best and things like that. But by the time we were done, we bought dog tag blanks that were 25 cents a piece, and we were able to create dog tags. It's just one of like a million things that you can do with a CNC. Now, if you add 3D printing to it, which is one of the nice things about the Stepcraft system, is I could take the mill out and put a 3D print head on, and now I have a 3D printing machine. That opens up another world of options and things that you can create. If you go to a website called thingiverse.com, there's literally tens of thousands of projects that people design, and they upload to that website every day. And you can download whatever the project is for free, and you can print it out and create it on your own machine. They have, not everything is 3D print related. They do have some CNC files there as well. And I've had a lot of good experience with it. We had a problem in my house with my kids, and some of you might be able to relate to this, where my kids love to go grab a bag of Smart Food or they'll grab a bag of potato chips, and they'll take a couple handfuls, and then an hour later you walk into the kitchen and the bag is on the counter completely open. And I partly want to blame them because I'm like, why didn't you close the bag? And my daughter came up to me and she said, but Dad, we don't have anything to clip the bag closed with. I said, okay, fair enough. So I went to Thingiverse and I did a search for bag clip, and I found somebody had designed, apparently they have the same problem with kids just like I do, but they designed a bag clip. So I downloaded the file, I sliced it, and I printed it out on my Stepcraft machine. It took about 30 minutes. When I was done, I had a flexible PLA bag clip that I just roll up the bag and I push it over the end and it pinches it closed. And now I don't have to worry about stale chips, and it's easy for my kids to use. So while I was at it, I printed a bunch of them, so I had some extras, and I took care of that problem. Now we have no more open bag issues. So you could see that every day little common problems will be solved because you have access to a machine that allows you to pretty much take any problem and create a solution for it, or any idea that you might see in a store or online in a catalog. And using some very simple software, most of it free for that matter, you could sit down and you could create your own sign or your own letters or your own project that you could do with your family in a matter of minutes. And the possibilities that you have with this technology are, they're amazing. And I just wanted to start this podcast off by talking about that because I thought it was really cool. This sign thing was kind of a big deal to me. I wanted one for my house. It gave me the idea. It's not that I didn't want to buy one from this vendor, and actually I would have had I thought that they were handmade by that one vendor. But then when I found out that they were made probably overseas, some mass production, I just couldn't justify spending, almost $25 for something that I could make on my own. Plus it created a good project and something for me to make a video and kind of showcase some stuff with the Stepcraft machines. So that is what I did. All right, so I want to share an email that I just received as a support email to Stepcraft. And this applies to, I think, any CNC owner of a machine or anybody who's looking to potentially buy a CNC machine. This person was basically asking if we would create some tutorial videos on setting up various tools like our drag knife and wire cutter, etc. And I just published a video last night on how to set up our drag knife and how to use Cut2D to create a toolpath for cutting vinyl. So I posted that last night. I'll put the link on the show notes as well. Anyway, this person said, thanks, those videos are helpful. Part of what I'm not sure about is how to best create my own content. As far as I could tell, none of the software included with the machine is actually for creating 2D paths for these tools. The drag knife video shows Cut2D, which supports content creation, while Cut3D does not. I found that Inkscape has a plugin for G-code generation, but it's very difficult to use. Do you have any recommendations for software that I could use to create content to drive the drag knife, engraver, pen, or etc.? Okay, well, this is a great question, and I'm sure it's a question that most beginners have when they're looking to buy a machine. It's not like you can just look at the machine and think of something and it'll make it. You actually have to design whatever it is that you're going to create, or find a design online that you can download and have converted into G-code to run on the machine. So we do a lot with Vectric products, Cut2D, Cut3D, VCarve Pro. They're all amazing programs. And the one program that I recommend for all Stepcraft customers when they buy a machine is to make the $150 investment and purchase a copy of Vectric Cut2D. Now, what's nice about this program is it allows you to do some very basic drawing. You could draw squares and circles, and you could do node editing to do complex shapes. You could do text manipulation. It allows you to import a bitmap image, and there's an image trace feature which will create a path, an outline path around any bitmap image that you might import into your machine. So it gives you a lot of flexibility if you just need something to learn to do some basic drawings or simple shapes, or if you're going to use your machine to cut letters like I was talking about earlier. Cut2D is perfect for that. You don't need any additional software. Now, I am also a fan of using Adobe Illustrator, and I know it's a paid program. I have Creative Cloud. You can get that for, I think it's $19 a month. I have the full version, which is closer to $50 a month. So that might be an investment that a lot of people don't want to make. And so you do have options. You're fortunate. There is a program called Inkscape that is completely free. It's very powerful. It's an equivalent to Adobe Illustrator. It has full vector capabilities, a lot of powerful tools that you can use to create 3D drawings as well as 2D drawings. It's not something I use on a regular basis, mainly because I'm a Mac guy and it is a Windows-based program. So for all you guys that are using Windows, if you don't mind that, Inkscape works fine. I happen to use Illustrator simply because I'm making the investment every month for their Creative Cloud suite. However, I am making it a point to learn a little bit about Inkscape so I can do more videos and talk about it on the podcast. Because it is a free program, I tend to recommend that people get it and learn it, because you don't have to spend any money. So it's pretty simple. Now, that's good for drawing and manipulation of characters and letters and things like that. But if you want to look to do really detailed or really specific drawings, then you might want to look to a CAD program. Now, there's tons of CAD programs on the market, some that are free and some that cost thousands of dollars. And the advantage of a CAD program is if you're trying to make a part for something, or you're going to design maybe a quadcopter or something very specific that you need, a CAD program has a lot of features that will allow you to do measurements and make things to very, very precise dimensions and tolerances. So I'm a big fan of SketchUp. Used to be owned by Google, but you can go to sketchup.com and check it out. They have a SketchUp Make version, which is completely free. It's very easy to use for basic stuff, but it does have some very powerful capabilities, and there's a lot of plugins and things like that that are available for it from third-party vendors to expand its capabilities. There's thousands of videos on YouTube. There's training courses from websites like lynda.com that you could go through a complete soup to nuts tutorial on how to use it. But the program itself is free, and it will allow you to output the files in a format that you could bring them into Vectric Cut 2D, and you could create a toolpath for it. So for instance, say I was drawing something, like a bird feeder, and I'm going to draw all the sides of the bird feeder, and I'm going to cut them out in plywood. Well, each part is drawn in 2 dimensions, essentially. So you're going to draw each side, you're going to put the hole in, a window, the roof, and you're going to output each side as a separate file. Those files would then be brought into Vectric Cut 2D, and you would basically click on the outline of the perimeter of each part, and then you would assign a toolpath to it. So for instance, if you were just going to cut one of the sides and it's like rectangular, you would click on that outline, go into the toolpaths, and if you're using, say, 1/8" plywood, you could pick an end mill, whatever size that you want to use, 1/8, 1/16, it doesn't matter. And you could tell it, okay, I want to cut on the outside of this line, and I need to go down 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to do it in 2 passes, and it'll create a toolpath. It'll generate a live 3D view of your part so that you can rotate it and look at it to make sure it looks okay. I want to say that that's 99% accurate to what you'll see when you actually cut the part out on the machine. So if that looks good, you could simply save the G-code file and load it into your machine and cut it out. It's really that simple. Now, the other thing you can do with SketchUp and Inkscape for that matter is you could draw things in 3 dimensions. And say, for instance, like on the Stepcraft machine, we have a 3D printer attachment. When you're doing 3D printers, typically the file of choice is an STL file. It stands for stereolithography. And what that does is it takes the 3-dimensional part that you draw, whether it be Inkscape or SketchUp, or any program for that matter, and you can export the file to an STL, and then you bring it into the Repetier slicing software that we include, or any 3D printer has their own slicing software. It could be Cura, whatever your printer you're using will have its own software. And what it does is it analyzes the part, and it says, okay, it knows how thick each layer is. So it looks at the part, it basically slices it horizontally, and it analyzes a tool path for the printer head to move, given that thickness of material it's laying down per layer. So it's a very powerful program. And you have the ability with both SketchUp and Inkscape to do that. And again, many programs, all the way up to SolidWorks, which is a very expensive program, you have the ability to do just that. Now, the other thing as far as milling is we can do 3-dimensional carving on a CNC mill. And to do that, Vectric has a program called Cut 3D. And that program will also accept an STL file just like the 3D printer would. And it allows you to take that three-dimensional image and lay it onto a piece of material. And you can recess it in the material, you can put it up above, and however you want to manipulate it. But what it'll do is it'll remove all the material around it, and it will do a very fine, detailed carving. Usually you use a small ball nose, like an 1/8 inch or a 16th inch ball nose. And when you're done, it'll keep removing material and it'll do a final pass. And when you're all done, you'll have a very smooth, carved piece of wood that replicates the file that you put in there. So the STL files work both for three-dimensional carving as well as 3D printing. And so to answer this question, yeah, my recommendations, I think I already said it, would be Cut 2D for sure, because you have some drawing capabilities in there and you have the ability to take a more complicated file from Inkscape or Sketchup or any CAD or drawing program and import it and use it as a CAM program, basically to assign the toolpaths and create the G-code. So it's kind of a dual purpose software. For CAD design, if you're not seriously doing this as a high-end business or you're not a massive machine shop or something, SketchUp is great. I recommend it. SketchUp Make is free. It'll do, I don't know. I've been using it for years and I honestly have not run into anything yet that I can't draw in that program and either 3D print or CNC. So I would definitely recommend going down that path. And we'll talk more about how to do specific things with SketchUp in future episodes, and I'll do support videos as well to illustrate that. Inkscape is the other program. If you're a PC user or you're a Mac user running parallels with Windows, I recommend Inkscape. If you don't want to spend the money for Adobe Illustrator, Inkscape is a great program. There's also CorelDRAW, which is also a commercial program, so you'd have to buy that. But if you're looking for something for free that's very, very powerful, that will allow you to do drawing and, like I said, manipulation of characters and shading and different line thicknesses and all that stuff, Inkscape is a really good program for that. I'm learning it now, and I will talk more about kind of my journey with it here in the future. But it's a very good program and will not leave you limited in terms of what you might be looking to draw and create. All right, so that about does it for this week. I want to thank you again for joining me, and I really appreciate the positive feedback and the positive comments that you guys are leaving. I would like to ask again, if you like the podcast and can see the vision I have and where I want to go with this, please go on to iTunes and give it a 5-star rating. If you don't mind, I would really appreciate that. And that will help the podcast be seen by more people, showing its popularity. If you know anybody that's into CNC or 3D printing or is new or is considering getting involved, please, share the link to this podcast. I'd really appreciate that. If you want more information on the Stepcraft machines, please visit www.stepcraft.us. And hopefully I will hear more from you. If you have any questions, please just drop me an email or leave a comment on the show notes for this episode. So the show notes will be at youcreatepodcast.com/003. Thank you very much and have a great week. We'll talk to you next week. Talk to you next week. Talk to you next week. Talk to you next week.